Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, live from the West Coast. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Our guest this week on the pod is Kim Furlong, CEO of Retail Council of Canada. Kim was chosen to lead Retail Council of Canada in the fall of last year, 2025. They advocate for retailers in Canada through effective advocacy, communications, and education. And she, of course, took over for longtime CEO Deanne Brisebois, who's been on our show before. This is one of her first long-form interviews and a great discussion. In some ways, a counterpart to FHCP, Michael Graydon, who advocates for the brands. In some ways aligned for sure, and I thought it was a great conversation.
It was absolutely, and so I have not met Kim in person yet. It's probably coming eventually. She's got some big shoes to fill, of course, with Deanne's departure, but she's hit the ground running. I mean, after 6 months, she seems to be well in control of the major files that are in her portfolio. I mean, it's not an easy period to be a grocer right now, and but she seems to understand really what is at stake here, and she's embracing the moment.
Well, and of course, for broader context, she doesn't Retail Council doesn't just work for the grocers; they work for all retailers in Canada of all formats, coast to coast.
This is a food show, so I don't care about Radio Shack.
Radio Shack.
What did I say? Radio Shack. Oh my God, that's how pathetic I am with retail.
Let's get you out of the Wayback Machine here. Let's get you into real life. Where are you today?
So I was in Vancouver this morning, but I am in Chilliwack right now at a conference called Grounded Innovation. It's organized by the University of Fraser Valley. Okay. So they have two campuses, one in Abbotsford, the other one is in Chilliwack. And it's a beautiful atrium. It's a beautiful building here, really. And so it's mostly academic, but they've actually had people from the Ministry of Agriculture involved in some of the discussions on the panels. It's really about, how do we innovate? How do we build new companies? How do we build resiliency for supply chains? The themes that we often discuss on our show here.
Right.
And it's been interesting. So we've actually had a panel on strategy for the province. It's very BC specific, I'll be honest. Okay. And of course, the other issue is in relation to how do we bridge both industry and academia together, working together. And tomorrow, we're actually doing a private session. I'm part of a larger super cluster. I don't think I've actually spoken about this before on the show, but the federal government gave us $16 million last year to basically support an innovation cluster within academia. So tons of universities are involved, including, of course, Dalhousie, University of Guelph, University of Fraser Valley, University of Alberta, also the University of Saskatchewan. McGill is also involved. Laval is also involved. So all of us were actually here today and tomorrow to talk about how do we support innovators that would eventually end up, at places like Seattle. Really, to be honest.
Well, I'm in LA today. I had quite an adventure getting here. I was on a flight on Air Canada, which was quite smooth until the landing lights broke at LAX airport. So I wound up in Phoenix for a few hours. But eventually I got to LA.
You were about to land, and they actually just went to Phoenix?
Well, we were closing in on Phoenix, and they just told everybody inbound planes you can't land. And we didn't have enough. We were bingo on fuel. We didn't have enough fuel to circle for 3 hours. So we landed in Phoenix. This is the captain, of course, explaining this, taking good care of us. And we wound up in Phoenix for a couple of hours, and then we still circled LAX for an hour. And then so put it all together, and I got to my Airbnb here in Culver City at 3:30 in the morning, California time, which was 6 a.m. my time. And then anyway, so if I sound a bit different,
this morning.
Yesterday. So I've the cobwebs. I've had a day to shake the cobwebs out of my head.
Okay.
So I'm good. But today,
I was actually running while you were trying to figure out a way to get to LA.
Well, I was just hoping when I got to the Airbnb. Of course, it's very late at night, 3:00 in the morning, and these things are very residential. I was just hoping not to get shot like trying to find the right door to go in. So that was my objective, singularly, not to get shot as a burglar.
Fine? You seem fine. You're in one piece.
I did get away with it. Now, I bring this up for a couple of reasons. One, I sound a bit different, but two, I also have done some shopping, of course, checking out some retail. So brand new store opened up.
Why am I not shocked?
Why are you not shocked? A brand new store opened up here, and it's a great connection to me because I know the architect and the architect company, Kevin Kelly and his group did it. It's a wonderful. I just put it up a post on our YouTube page. I did a kind of a short walk and talk. Such a beautiful architecture store. Now, it is a super premium. It's in Beverly Hills, North Hollywood or West Hollywood, super premium. So, I went in and I'm going to do a little show and tell. I bought these chocolate covered coffee beans for $27 US.
Wow.
So bringing that home. But it's got a mix of private label. The architecture is stunning. You'll be able to see it on our YouTube channel. And then I went to the OG of upscale grocers, Erewhon. Have you heard of Erewhon?
I've heard of it.
Yep.
But tell us what it is.
Well, Erewhon is a super premium, grocery store. There's nothing quite like it. I guess it's like a high-end Eataly, so to speak. It's not that it's focused on Italian food. And it was just up the street from Laurel Supply. So from these two places, they've got amazing build-outs of takeout and of food. Like that's a big, super premium kitchens. So there's a lot of people in there getting their dinners actually to take out. So you really see the grocery trend. Not quite a fit here, but they had some very interesting merchandise, lots of private label, kind of a farm boy meets what used to be Pusatteri's and now it's kind of Massimo's Tironi stores, like these high-end things. And of course, then I went to not just going to the super premium, I went to a place called Bristol Farms, which is a local LA, California place, which is actually the holding company is run by someone I know. And, of course, what did I find? Some bespoke sardines, that I picked up. There they are. Picked up some, and now this is not it's Fishwife. So Fishwife's got a great story of a DTC direct-to-consumer company in the bespoke sardines. And I have never had Fishwife before. So beautiful packaging.
Wow.
There it is.
Very colorful
on the screen.
Yeah.
And then I went, of course, to the mayonnaise aisle. And I picked up some Duke's mayonnaise.
Yes, your favorite.
Then I also picked up the brand new Grazza. This is this squeezable olive oil in bottles. And they've come out with a new mayo. So I'm going to have a mayo off.
Is that a California-based company?
It is. And I'm going to have a mayonnaise mayo off for my barbecue show. I'm going to put these two up against our good friend at Mag, who I think will beat them hands down. Mag mayo is now my new favorite. Shout out.
So how are you going to do your taste off there? Who's going to be involved?
I'm going to just do it for the camera, and then I'm going to get the family to taste it. I'm going to make a really good 3 different types of potato salad.
Lucky family.
And see which ones just pop. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing. I'm in LA with my my other property, the Global E-commerce Leaders Forum. We're having a dinner tonight for that community here in LA, and that's what brings me here. But let's get into the news because there is a lot of news to get through. There's a
lot of stuff going on.
A lot of news. Let's start with Dunkin' Donuts. So they made an announcement. They're coming back to Canada. And I wanted to ask you.
Canada's going to be running on Dunkin'.
Well, I wanted to ask you, where do you think the white space is between Tim Hortons coffee, which is quite good, and McDonald's coffee, which is quite good? If you think of these two super scalers, where's the white space for Dunkin' to put a couple of hundred locations in? What do you think?
Well, I think everyone's talking about Tim Hortons, and I think they're not wrong. I think the luster around Tim Hortons has slowly vanished in the last few years. Sales are okay in Canada. If you look at financials at RBI, Tim Hortons is still doing okay. But with 4,000 locations, and we're hearing rumors that perhaps, there are some issues with service, the quality of the service in stores. And of course, the issue to me in Tim Hortons is I'm not sure they actually are getting all the demographics. If you walk into Tim Hortons, it's pretty old. A lot of people are gravitating around Tim Hortons based on nostalgia. But I do think that food...
Or is it food-tastic? Is it food-tastic?
Food-tastic. I met the CEO in Montreal once. He's a great guy. And frankly, he's I think he owns the QSR. So first of all, they own Second Cup, so they're not new to coffee. And Second Cup is a good managed brand, and so people do see the potential of seeing some good stewardship behind Dunkin.
I know the market.
They're going to grow. They're going to grow slowly. They're going to grow slowly, and I don't think they're going to open up 600 stores all at once, but they're going to grow slowly. But with Dunkin', I do think that there's potential to. I would say 10 years ago there was no room. Probably not, but in the last, I'd say 10 years, people are starting to. See some fatigue around the Tim Hortons brand, if you will. I think that's the blind spot. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I think more about McDonald's, really. I mean, yes, Tim Hortons, but, we've talked about the McDonald's coffee price. I mean, Dunkin' Donuts is a value-based and has a youth audience, but maybe Dunkin' can come in and slide in between them and say we're the new hipster Dunkin'. Yeah. Maybe. I mean, these guys know the market. I mean, I don't think they're going to have any magic solution to finding people, which is part of the problem. That,
by the way, McDonald's on Monday actually was announcing that it was coming out with energy drinks as part of their offering, which is interesting. So McDonald's is not solely dependent on coffee traffic. So, and they're expanding their portfolio a little bit, which I think is interesting. I think they just want to make their market a little bit more youthful, which I think is missing at Tim Hortons a little bit. I know they've gotten spokespeople like Justin Bieber and now Ryan Reynolds and all that stuff. But I would say that there is an opportunity here. I'm not convinced that McDonald's will be affected by a new Dunkin' Donuts. I don't see the rivalry there, but I do see certainly a rivalry between Dunkin' Donut and Tim Hortons.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so we got some news for a producer in the greenhouse space coming out of bankruptcy. Tell the people about it.
Yeah, so Demers was actually under receivership. It was it's big news in Quebec for sure because it was part of the food autonomy strategy in Quebec, and they invested millions of dollars. I think close to $20 million. The Quebec government was involved. I believe FCC was involved. But it was under receivership, and so a lot of people were wondering. And these facilities are state of the art, and so a lot of people were wondering what was going to happen. And we did get some good news. Savoura, which is a Quebec-based company, a Canadian-based company, has decided to acquire Demers. Probably, I don't know exactly the details in terms of amounts. I suspect it's probably going to be a few cents on the dollar. Let's face it, but at least it's actually going to be used, and they're going to produce more food for Quebec and export markets. So I thought it was good news. I think the lesson here is that we need to embrace risk taking. I think the Demers project was risky, but unlike most Canadians, we tend to poo-poo on failures. And Americans, when you fail, people will give you even more money because they see you as a risk taker.
Or you're trying at least. You're trying. That old saying, right? If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. Kind of. That's
what I do think we should do is congratulate Demers for trying, but there is a bit of a good outcome here. Obviously, if you're owed money, it's certainly not good news for you, but I think it's good news for the province overall.
Interesting story in the dairy sector with the DFO waiving April over quota fees. What's going on here? Where's the demand coming from? It sounds like they need some more product. What's going on?
Dairy proteins are having a moment, and the DFO have noticed. So in April, so last month, what we learned from the Ontario Farmers Magazine is that they actually waived fines for overproduction. And guess what? In April, no dairy farmers dumped. Was that so hard? Was that so hard, dairy farmers of Ontario? Just don't fine people. They overproduce. Take the milk and find a market for it. And you're not going to see any dumping. I mean, how ridiculous is that? It's not acceptable to see dairy farmers dumping because of demand, because of hard demand. They're actually just making sure that they have enough product to sell. The problem is when things go in reverse, right? When there's less demand, they want to control prices as much as possible. And this is where I think the DFO is losing people more and more because people know now. So kudos to them. I would say, you know what? April sets a precedent. Let's continue not to find our poor farmers, our hardworking farmers, and find a market for their product.
Let's move on to climate change. So you did a post. I'm sure you got some feedback on it. I'm absolutely sure. But you said that some, and I wanted to unpack the some and who, because I'm sure you've been getting some feedback on it, of the world's leading climate scientists are acknowledging humanity unlikely to follow the catastrophic path that has been the kind of narrative for the last decade. And this has very broad implications for a whole bunch of things. But first of all, where did you see these climate scientists speaking, and who are they? Is it you're big on peer-reviewed journals. Tell us the background, and then tell us what the possible implications are.
Yeah, for those who are interested, if you actually go on the website called Geoscientific Model Development, that's basically, you can find many papers. Actually, they release papers on a monthly basis on what's going on with climate change, what's going on with forecasts in general, and as you know, I'm big on forecasting. But on April 7th of this year, the same committee, the IPCC committee, that basically provided recommendations that led to the Paris Agreement. You remember the Paris Agreement with our commitment to reduce greenhouse gases by 2030. Well, on April 7th, they actually claimed that the worst case scenario is less likely to be plausible.
Okay.
So in other words,
there, sure.
Oh, absolutely. It's super. This is an important piece of information. And again, I'm not saying that they're doing a mea culpa. They've actually got it wrong. That's not what they're saying. It's science. They have new data. And with new data, they actually worked on models, and they realized that perhaps the worst case scenario was over-exaggerated, basically, which led to the rhetoric around climate crisis. We need to actually act now. It's already too late. Like David Suzuki is saying, all these things are basically, they're saying, you know what, maybe we should tone it down a little bit, still focus on dealing with climate change, but there's less urgency, which is really important, because as soon as you implement food policy with the thinking that things are urgent, you're going to end up with bad policy. And to me, it was a seminal paper. And again, I do want to encourage people to actually go on their website and look at the paper. It's scientific, I know, but it's super interesting. The reason why I wanted to talk about this on the show is that, well, no one else is talking about it. And I think it's important for people to know, to understand. And the problem with research like this, when it's so noisy, when it's so influential on a world scale, you'll end up seeing governments being elected based on a premise that there's a climate urgency. You'll see research funding being given for 5 to 10 years based on there's a climate urgency. I'm part of a couple of groups thinking we need to solve this problem until before 2030, or else it's the end of the world kind of thing. It's going to take time before there's going to be a bit of a pivot from a narrative perspective. And just this morning, I was actually here at the University of Fraser Valley, and the first keynote was all about this climate urgency. We need to act now. It's probably too late already, and you could feel like in the room, like especially the young students. Oh my God, they're eco-anxious, and so I do think that it's going to take a while, but we're actually going to get to a place where there's more. I would say, rationality to this problem. If you think of the acid rain crisis in the 80s, you're old enough to remember that, right?
I remember it well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Guess what happened? We dealt with it. And guess what happened with the ozone layer problem? We dealt with it. And with proper policy, without any urgency, without basically calling it a crisis, we dealt with these issues. And it's going to be the same thing for climate change with new information. And we were able to monitor the ozone layer problem and the acid rain problem with new data to reassure the public. So I think we're actually going through that cycle again.
Well, connected to that, let's move on to the next story. Ottawa and Alberta looks like they're close to reaching an industrial carbon pricing deal. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this until it actually happens. I'd rather it's like why the MOU has missed a lot of deadlines that they signed with Alberta. So let's talk about it when it happens. But basically, there's a couple of interesting things about this. A, that they're doing a custom deal for Alberta. B, then all the other provinces are going to say, well, fine, then I get a custom deal too. And C, if you could spend just a minute on what this means if it comes to pass for the ag sector.
Well, what's being reported by the Globe and Mail this week is that we may actually see a pause on the industrial carbon tax, essentially. This is really important. So we're talking about a delay, a pause at 130 a metric ton, because right now we're at 110. And we're likely going to hit 170 by 2030. This could be delayed to 2040 at 130, not 170. Okay. That's a big, big deal. And of course, it's relevant to food because that 170/130 impacts fertilizer prices, impacts machinery prices, impacts everything around food systems, making things more expensive for farmers, for manufacturers, for everyone else. And so if Alberta can actually seal a deal to support the pipeline ambitions that they have, this could actually have a ripple effect on everyone else within the nation. All other provinces will likely have to follow, which is why, Carney's pivot is spectacular. Even to see a headline like that, I was quite shocked. He's seen as the net zero prime minister, and all of a sudden he sees this pipeline as quite strategic, and he's willing to make a compromise. And frankly, I absolutely am supportive of this. This is such a very important issue. So again, climate change is very important, but we can't really put aside economic development and our food security. So I'm hoping that the deal will actually go through.
Well, a last story just before we get to our interview with Kim Furlong from Retail Council of Canada. The Bank of Canada has now put out a report acknowledging that tariffs and counter-tariffs contribute to higher prices. Now, when I first read this in your notes, I'm like, we knew that in the short term, but it seems like it is rippled through and continued on in the medium to longer term. Is that what your takeaway was? Of course.
It's distortion. Of course, it distorts the market. It distorts market conditions. When policy distorts market conditions, it's long lasting. Like the GST holiday. It didn't last 2 months. It opened up the door to opportunistic pricing. We've talked about that on the show. So you've seen inflation being impacted by the GST holiday, even though it lasted 2 months. Same for counter-tariffs. And since day one, on March the 3rd, 2025, I've said, and you've said, it's a bad idea. We're taxing Canadians. But with the elbows up movement, no one wanted to hear about it. Many Canadians, I believe, felt that it was important to do to hit the presidency, to hit President Trump, where it hurts. But the reality is when you apply a counter-tariff, it hurts Canadians. And for months, we saw many academics around the country saying, no, it's actually worth it. Ottawa is looking at substitutes. And if we have substitutes, we'll be fine. That's not how our pricing works. And you're a retail guru. You know that if you actually raise the price for one, others will follow. That's really because everything is relative at the grocery store. You'll compare prices. If one price goes up like this, do you think the grocer will actually keep the other price there? No. Everything gets inflated. It's like the tide. Everything goes up. And what the Bank of Canada basically is saying this week is that there is a legacy to counter-tariffs that ended in September of last year. It just basically inflated everything at the grocery store. It was bad policy, and thank goodness Mark Carney Well, he saw that. He eliminated the counter-tariffs in September, a while ago, but we're still being affected by that.
Did the report, and I haven't read the report. I've been, flying between Toronto, Ottawa, Phoenix, and LA.
Yeah. In the airline that didn't land, or the plane that didn't land or couldn't land?
Well, yeah, thank you to the pilot for taking care of us, by the way, from Air Canada.
Yeah.
But did the report say that when any of these inflation impacts would ebb? Because it has been,
it's hard to tell, because inflation is always hard to. I mean, the challenge with policy is that, like, if you get rid of a tax, you put a tax in. It's like it's not just under the Liberals. Harper actually made the same mistake. I mean, he actually cut the GST by 1% twice in 18 months, and inflation went up. It didn't go down. Just because you distort market conditions with policy. So as soon as you play around with policy, you pay for it as a government and you pay for it as a consumer. That's the lesson right there. What I'm not frustrated, but what I'm disappointed in is that people just wouldn't listen. Like reporters didn't want to listen. They weren't reporting on it. They thought it was actually a good thing, but it wasn't.
All right, well, let's take a break from the news, and let's hear from our guest, Kim Furlong, Retail Council of Canada. We'll be back after that. We're going to talk about the return of Eves, and we're going to talk about a few other things, particularly related to our guest from next week. So but for now, let's have a listen to our interview with Kim Furlong.
Well, welcome to the podcast, Kim.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so you've been CEO of RCC for about 6 months, I believe now, and I'm sure that you've had enough time to digest and appreciate your new environment. But before we dive into to who you are, could you explain to our audience what is the Retail Council of Canada, what it does, and who it represents?
The Retail Council of Canada is a national organization that represents the interests of retailers, and we represent the full gamut, the full spectrum of operators, from small independents who have a unique shop to the largest platforms. Think Walmart, Costco, all of our grocers, Amazon, and everyone in between. And so the issues are varied and differ from province to province to the national scene. And our objective is to defend the interests of retailers, to advocate for the best environment for them to operate in, and to bring them together from time to time to gain some insights and to create connection.
Now, last fall, you stepped into a role that was occupied by a legend of the industry, Diane Brisebois. Big shoes to fill, but when you were appointed, I think most of the industry was welcoming the news, I guess, and because you have a lot of experience over the years. Could you tell us more about what kind of experience you've had and what made you such a good fit for RCC?
Well, I'm returning. So some people have known the name because I was at RCC 18 years ago. And you're right, Deanne was and is still a legend. She's still very active. She used to lobby me. So I worked in government. I was an official for a number of years, and I served 2 ministers. And she would come in regularly. I have a master's in trade policy on NAFTA, Chapter 11, and I served the trade minister at the time where Deanne and I first encountered each other. And we were dealing with files that we're dealing with today, like safeguards and anti-dumping issues back then. And when the Paul Martin government came to an end, Deanne invited me to open their first Ottawa office, which I did for a couple of years. And so I'd had my time as an official and as a political aide. I came to RCC for a couple of years. I left RCC to go work for a U.S. biotech company and led their external affairs for Canada for a decade. Left that and then ran and was the CEO of the Canadian Venture Capital and Private Equity for 6 years. Deanne kept musing that she would retire, and she kept in touch and kept whispering to me, Kim, if I go, you should come.
One day.
And then there were some board members that I knew that were whispering, Kim, you should come. And they made a very compelling offer to me to come in and gave me a very interesting change mandate, because Deanne was here for 30 years. And that meant, she built something great. But I always say the owner of this house was here for 30 years, and the house would have looked very different if it had 3 owners. So I'm here to inject some novelty and some freshness and to re-energize some elements of RCC.
So, I mean, I think it's no secret that the sector, the retail sector, and in particular for this podcast, the food retail sector is under intense scrutiny over the last few years. Were you surprised by what you've seen so far? Are you not surprised? What's your take on what you've heard so far as CEO?
Yeah, and that's a question I get a lot. Like, what surprised you the most coming back and taking on this role? And even though I was here all those years ago, because I was in Ottawa and because I was dealing with very specific policy file, I didn't really have a true appreciation. And maybe the last decade plus has changed the game, but the intensity of the competition in the marketplace and how quickly retailers have to move and how quickly they have to adjust to external pressures and make decisions long in advance about what is going to land on their shelves and the contracts that are signed, and just the level of dynamics and movement and pressure in the industry, I did not comprehend to the extent that I do sitting in this chair 6+ months in.
Kim, let's dial in on the food business. So Canadians, as you would know, would cite food and food affordability as probably their top cost concern, if not their top concern in their life. Do Canadians understand, and we've been talking about this, you and I and Sylvain and I and many, many people, do Canadians understand what goes on behind the prices and products that appear in their shelves and the roles of grocers versus the manufacturers and all the many, many disruptive global forces? Do you think where do you think they are on a scale of 1 to 10? Do they think many Canadians understand what goes on and what makes the price on their shelves?
I don't think that they appreciate the extent. I think they see the shelf, but not the supply chain, as you just alluded to, Michael, behind it. And the chain is long and increasingly volatile. At the end of the day, grocers are the final step. And prices are largely driven by upstream pressures, like you just named it, like manufacturer, global commodities, energy, transport, labor, currency. Like the list goes on, and it's becoming more and more difficult to do so. And my favorite example is and we're a family that consumes a lot of beef, and I know all these grills are going to be lit up in the next few weeks as we head into summer. And I know, Michael, you're always on the grill, but like when you look at the price of steak in beef, and you're average Canadian, you think am I really going to spend $40 on 3 steaks? And there's no way that the retailer decided that that's the price that we're going to charge. And when you think about what's happening in the Gulf and the price of gas and moving things, if you're going to do fresh produce and meats, you get deliveries multiple times a week, and now you're getting fuel surcharges from your manufacturers and your suppliers. So it's the last stop. The retailer is the last stop on the long chain of people that are putting prices forward. And oftentimes the consumer thinks, I can't believe the retailer has chosen to sell it to me at this price. When in the reality of things, in an environment where margins are 2, 3, 4%, maybe if you've got a pharmacy attached to it, there's no room. There's no room to really absorb everything that's coming at them.
You know, if you think back the last 5 years, the number of shocks that are very public, right? There's some supply chain things that happen and people don't connect the dots that could increase the price of food. But going back to the COVID era and droughts, and now, of course, the war that's closed the Strait of Hormuz, is it a communication issue, do you think, or is it a trust issue for retailers as a general category that consumers still, doubt that pricing is brought on by these other forces, including what we just talked about?
I think it may be a little bit of both. I think the industry may not have always done a great job explaining how pricing works and the modernization of that supply chain. At the same time, prices rise quickly and trust naturally gets eroded. You see these prices, you think why? And so you kind of think the retailer, and that's not unique to grocery. You see these prices go up, although groceries is where people come in multiple times a week. So they're constantly put in front of that new reality. And I guess the key point I'd like to make is that it's a highly competitive sector. And if retailers could sustainably reduce the price to try to get that foot traffic and that market share, they would.
The latest flashpoint in pricing or trust, I don't know what we call it, is this surveillance pricing issue that it didn't exactly come out of nowhere, but it certainly got a lot of oxygen with the new NDP leader, Avi Lewis, talking about banning it, and then some provinces have jumped in. So as you understand it, what do you think's got, the media, politicians, maybe consumers pretty animated, and how are your members thinking about the lines on dynamic or ethical line on pricing?
Yeah, well, I think it's so interesting, Michael, and thanks for asking me this question, because when you hear algorithmic pricing and the use of data in pricing, that's been going on forever. It's just the sophistication of it and the availability of data has grown over the years, and our retailers have had the ability across the board to tailor offers to people. And I get my weekly offers, and I'm a mom, so I buy the same thing for these lunches every week. And I get my offers that say, this is a deal that you should consider, Kim, like we're going to reduce these items. And I think they're counting on me to come in. And when I'm there, I'm going to buy the rest of the things that I need. What you see in this debate is retailers increasing the price. So surveillance pricing would mean they know how much you make, where you live, what you do, your propensity to buy. And because of that and because of your willingness, we're going to increase the price on you. There was one attempt at this by Instacart in the US. It was quickly found out. It was reputationally damaging. Everyone saw it. It was shut down. And so when I look at the politicians that are seizing onto this issue, they see that the cost of living is the number one issue.
Sure,
they have no control over it. And they're grabbing onto this issue, thinking, okay, we're going to solve this for you. But my biggest peeve with it is that it's not happening in Canada. And everyone seems to say, oh, it's happening in the US, it's happening, so it must be happening here. But no one can point me to one instance. Now, I will say this. As a consumer, I want fairness in pricing. And I think all retailers understand the reputational damage that could come with those kinds of behaviors. And if the government were to legislate and to put a parameter, a frame around it that would prevent it from ever happening, I think the Retail Council would be behind that. But to not understand the issue that they're trying to solve for, to not having truly identify if it's happening in the market, and to want to legislate against it, could actually prevent you from giving discounts if it's not done properly. So I'm hoping that in the weeks and months to come, I'm going to spend more time with legislators framing the issue and understanding if they're going to be thinking about this. Because the data is there. Like the ability to do it, is it possible? Of course it is. Do you want to frame and put some guidance in front of people? Yes. So we should be talking about that and talking about future looking versus insinuating that it's happening without having had any instance in Canada of a retailer charging more based on who you are and your propensity to buy.
Yeah, I was actually quite surprised by the reaction, by the media reaction. I thought at first it was a nothing burger, really, but people just, I think with AI and everything else, people are a little concerned about some of the issues related to consumers in general. So that's probably why it's getting some attention. So I'm glad that you're on it. As a group, let's talk about another issue, of course, the Grocery Code of Conduct. It's a few months old now, and I guess, what are you hearing from your members so far in terms of how the code is working, supporting the industry overall?
All of the members of RCC that are in grocery have signed on to the code. The evolution of it came before I took this seat. So a lot of the work and having conversations about framing this issue, and it's a voluntary initiative. So everyone has agreed to come together and do this. I think given the pressure, and everyone are feeling them. Like when you see manufacturers, suppliers, grocers, everyone is feeling and navigating waters that are perhaps choppier and putting pressure on their own business model. So you can imagine that some of the conversations between suppliers and retailers over the years have been maybe at time tense because they're competing for the best price and they're looking for the best concessions. What I love about the code is that it brings everyone at a table with a framework for which to have conversations. The code is not about price. It's about the way that the relationship between the different parties work together and come to a resolution. I think everyone is in agreement that being self-regulated is better than having regulation imposed on you. And so I think everyone is going to try to work at their best to make sure it succeeds. And I will say what I love the most about the code is the woman who runs it, who has a experience in all sides of the table, has a really strong regulatory background, and has approached the creation of this organization with some structure and some discipline. And I just trust her. So I feel like Karen Proud is the right person to be at the helm, and she'll be tough with everyone. And that's what we need.
Yeah, absolutely. Karen has been on our show once, I think it was last year, and we actually met her in person again at Cial in Montreal. And so we're going to be broadcasting our next interview with Karen over the next few weeks. Yeah, absolutely. Very, very competent on both sides, really, in both processing and retail. I guess, since we have you on as the representative of food retail in Canada, what's the one operational challenge grocers face that you think most people underappreciate or wouldn't know about that is really impacting the entire sector right now?
I can think of two things, Sylvain. I can think about supply chain, and how complex it is. And the other thing that people underappreciate is how regulated this industry is. And it operates very differently in different provinces. Like running a store in BC is not like running a store in Newfoundland. Like you're dealing with different environment, different consumer, different needs, different ability to move products. And Michael Graydon and I talk about this a lot, like that policy layering where governments will say, well, it's not a big deal. You can just do the small thing. And it's not a big deal. You can just add this. And this is a new obligation that you have, but it's simple. But when you take everything that is being demanded, especially of food grocers, in the application and the running of their business, the person on the ground, the person from the outside does not appreciate the costs of running these obligations, from labeling. And we're not saying, to be very clear, I'm not saying there should be no labeling, but the intricacies and the burden of those layers of obligation, from recycling to layer, all of it is opaque to anyone who's not inside the operation of that business, and yet it has a huge impact on the cost that flows through to the consumer and the agility of that retailer to run their business.
So, Kim, you were recently down in Washington, meeting with some of your counterparts, Matt Shea from the NRF, which is kind of the equivalent of RCC, although they don't operate at the state level. But more importantly, you were down talking about trade, and of course, what did we've got this CUSMA review coming up. But what did you learn from a retailer perspective? As you've got certainly have the academic chops to understand trade with advanced degree in trade. I don't know if you would have studied this kind of environment for what's happening, but what did you learn about what the Americans are thinking, and what's your perspective coming back from that trip?
Well, I can tell you for a fact that what's going on right now is not typical of a trade negotiation. A trade negotiation is usually two parties going in, understanding that each other are going to have sensitivities and areas that are politically untouchable, and knowing what they are, and not knowing who will be the best man or the best woman in the room negotiating, and how far you can push people for those concessions. This is not that. This is, and what I heard from the U.S. government, the people that we met with, is Canada is not proceeding as quickly as Mexico in these negotiations, but Canada is not Mexico. Canada is strategically important and has a lot of things to protect. And I'm thinking here in terms of geopolitics, the access to the north, into those water straits. We have critical minerals. We have fresh water. And there was no such narrative around the 51st state when it came to Mexico. So I think Canada is one of the few countries to have been unflinching in its approach to this relationship, because there's so much at risk. From a retail perspective, myself, Mache, and our counterpart in Mexico issued a news release when I was down there and having conversations about the importance of this agreement, the importance to our economic prosperity, all three countries of this agreement. Our main key ask was do no harm. The movement north and south of goods, of people, and flow of trade has worked immensely well for all three, and we're all facing the same challenges in terms of running businesses, the available dollars in the average consumer. Discretionary spend is being eroded. A small portion of consumers still maintaining, like if you look at the aggregate numbers for spending, you would think retail numbers are strong. But if you start breaking it down, you realize that there's some portions of Canadians, Americans that have very little discretionary spending. And so Matt and I chatted about, what does the consumer look like? What does retail look like? And we are facing exactly the same pressures. So it's, but then we ended the conversation with resilience and retailers because, and what I was selling to Sylvain, like that realization of how competitive this market and this sector is. Like retailers have fight in them and they're agile and they think strategically and they move and they have to reinvent themselves and they have to make sure that they stay top of mind and they get that market share and that foot traffic by reinventing themselves and bringing offerings and novelty to the consumer.
We sure did hear, Sylvain. We heard Syvain and I were just in Montreal at Seattle, and we heard from guest after guest and hallway conversation after hallway conversation, this idea of reliability, right? We need reliable trade partnerships to do business, right? Sylvain, that was a big theme that we heard,
It's, 10 times, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So, but the fact that you went to Washington and more people are going to Washington visiting, reinforcing that message is certainly a good idea.
Ken, let's just stay with the government file, so to speak, as you might say, or we might say, just for my last question, then I'll pass the mic back to Sylvain to finish us off. What are a couple of things you would hope governments and the media understand better about the grocery industry? You've talked about this price layering issue already, and that affects both retailers and to some degree manufacturers as well. But what are those things that you wish, if you had a magic wand and you could, touch the media or touch the government officials, what do you wish they understood better?
Well, first, I think they need to understand better that grocery is a low margin, high volume business, and that shapes every decision. I think second, retailers don't control most of the costs that drive price. They operate within them. Next, the system is interconnected. Policy decision, we talked about this earlier, in trade, labor, environment, transportation, it all flows through the shelf. Oversimplifying the issue is you risk missing the point. And I think they kind of know this. They understand it. They still believe that it's a very lucrative business. And I think like when you're in pure grocery and you're at 2 to 3%, it's because of the high volumes, right? And we didn't talk about government-run grocery stores. Like when you look at what I've just listed to you, like the low margin, high volumes, like you don't control the price, you manage within, like you oversimplify like the pressures that are coming at you, and you have this dialogue from some provinces and municipalities that they're going to do this.
But Kim, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe if they try to run a grocery store, they'll have more understanding of these issues. I mean, is there a turning a frown upside down?
La Presse just recently published a survey asking Canadians about a publicly run grocery chain, and 54% of Canadians are supportive of the idea. That's really
who's going to pay for it?
I know.
Like, here's the thing. It has to be subsidized. For it to work, it has to be subsidized. And how do you control someone who really needs it versus someone who doesn't need it, who's just looking for a better price? Like when you think about the policy solutions on affordability, like wouldn't there be like more targeted ways to do this. And you're right, Michael, like if they did run it, they would realize that the concessions and the pricing that they're trying to do and the flow of good and like just what you can't sell, that ends up like the losses. And so it's such a complex business. That complexity of it is lost on government and in media. Not if you sit down and have a conversation, then they get it. But in the moment, as issues come up, they forget or they push it
opportunistic too, right? It's opportunistic too. Sure.
Yes. Well, again in Montreal, I met up with some folks from the city of Toronto, and my first advice was about this idea of launching a publicly owned grocery chain is do it and fail as quickly as possible. So taxpayers will save as much money as possible because you will eventually fail. I mean, that's really the reality. Very few actually, unless it's purposeful, like the U.S., where you have grocery chains on military bases. They don't operate at a profit. They operate a loss, but they do accept the service for people in the service. I mean, that's why they actually have these grocery stores. So it's a bizarre era right now that we're in for sure. I guess in closing, so if we were to talk to you in 3 years from now, and I hope that we will, how different do you think the grocery sector will look like in 3 to 5 years from now?
The investment in supply chain is going to transform. Like we see it, like even what I saw in the last 6 months, some of the investment in robotics, the movement and the control, like we didn't talk about electronic shelf labeling. Everyone, like it's attached to the surveillance pricing issue, but really it's about making sure that the inventory is well controlled. Like RCC runs something called the scanner accuracy program. You should see the number of Facebook sites where people are like calling on people to go to a retailer who has mislabeled something on the shelf and get the product for free. So making sure that the efficiency of running the business and anything that needs to be discounted because it's a perishable item and moving very quickly and not having human error part of it, and everything in the warehouse with the advent of AI, like AI and warehousing and supply chain is just starting in the movement of goods. So I think those efficiencies could help the retailers be able to pass on more savings. And I guess you never know where the world is going to go. What's happening today in Canada, US, and like the US stance on their role globally, what's happening in the Middle East, what we saw in Ukraine, what we see in terms of climate change. I wouldn't be surprised if things remain the same and if we had more conflict, that Canadians would find themselves having less selections. We've been very spoiled and very lucky in the ease of getting access to produce, to products. And I do think our retailers are going to continue to try to source domestically and closer to home. And we see the buy Canadian, it's still very strong. Like people have issues with their pocketbook, but they want to support local. So do our businesses, so do retailers. But so like there's going to be some investment, but I think there's going to be some headwinds. And I think we could come to a point where we're looking back on these years where everything was so easy and may not be as easy, and we'll have to make choices. So, but hopefully that's not the case. But you have to be prepared. Like hope is never a plan, so you have to be prepared for any scenarios where the business changes. And all I can say is retailers are agile, and those who've been doing it for a long time, I've seen a lot of ebbs and flows, and they're thinking strategically about their business. And so that gives me comfort that they'll be ready for any waves that come at them.
Well, listen, Kim Furlong, CEO of RCC, it's been a great conversation. And again, congratulations on your new appointment, and best of luck in the future.
Merci. Thank you, guys. Anytime.
All right, so we're back. Big news. We commented on this a while ago in the show that Eves was leaving the market. I was a fan of the Eves product, and we thought it was kind of a bit tired and kind of fell by the wayside. But now it looks like it's some news. It's been bought by Maple Leaf Foods, and it's being relaunched. Talk about it.
It's good news. It's a high quality product. It's Canadian, became American, but Maple Leaf Foods.
Is it ConAgra that bought it?
Yeah, that's right. It's
okay.
ConAgra, and they kind of gave it up. Basically, they gave up on the brand.
Yeah, 100%.
And but Maple Leaf, you gotta give credit to Maple Leaf Foods here. I mean, it's a good play. Eve's a popular product, and I know a lot of people will actually be happy because when you think about quality, I mean, Eve's was really a big player in bridging different diets, and you don't have to be a vegan or vegetarian to actually appreciate the quality of these products. A lot of people just enjoy these products, so that was a good move, good strategic move, and I believe they're back on shelves in July. Correct?
I know that if you saw July, then that's the case. I didn't see a date, but it's not launched yet. There's not even a website yet. But as you said, good news. Good news. I was a fan of the brand, and I'll welcome its return to the market. So
and we had the CEO of Maple Leaf Foods on the show a few months ago. So
that's right.
Great move.
All right, let's, we were at Cial, and by the way, if anybody hasn't had the opportunity, we filmed a lot of our interviews at Cial, so there's both our time together, but then we filmed a lot of interviews, and the fun one with our guest from last week, Kunana, the banana beverage. Great video. That's just been posted on our YouTube site, so run, don't walk to go see that. Coming up next week, our guest is going to be Karen Proud, recorded at Cial. And I thought it was interesting. The Code sent a note to everyone. And I guess this kind of starts to put some visual evidence or some evidence to kind of the work they do. And it was a click to accept practices. And it was kind of an overview of talking to both the members and the grocers about, when you get here's a note, here's a change that's going to happen. You click to accept. If you don't click, what happens? And so there's some feedback about, well, I need to just do my, I need to process this order. I need to click, but I don't exactly agree with every condition in it. Anyway, it just got me thinking about the great conversation we had with Karen. So that's coming up next week. Now, I want to end on a fun note. Are you a fan of tiramisu?
No.
Well, so it's not that fun for you. Well, I can tell you, I had an amazing, by the way, tiramisu when I was in Montreal at Restaurant Vivaldi. They made a homemade one. And my wife makes a fantastic tiramisu as well.
It's just as soon as you mention tiramisu, it reminds me of the movie Sleepless in Seattle. Have you seen them?
I have.
What's a tiramisu? I don't know. Oh my God.
Well, if you are a fan of tiramisu, the travel magazine is telling us that the folks in Italy are looking for 100 worldwide official tiramisu judges because they are doing a tiramisu World Cup. And so if you are interested in becoming a judge and you're a big fan of tiramisu, we'll put a link in the show notes so you can go participate and judge.
Can I ask you a question, Michael?
Yes, of course.
Have you ever tasted a bad tiramisu?
I've tasted a weak tiramisu, I have to say.
Oh, really? By the time you get to tiramisu, I mean, you're half drunk. You drank wine. Everything's good.
You had me at tiramisu. Yeah, basically, Tironi's, and we interviewed Massimo, the founder, makes a great tiramisu. But my wife does too, with tons of coffee in it, which is what I love. And anyway, great Italian specialty dessert. And if you're a fan, great news, you can become a judge. So there you go. All right. We'll come back next week. Our guest will be Karen Proud from the Code of Conduct, the official Code of Conduct organization. And also we'll be talking about whatever happened with Trump and the China summit. He took over a cast of characters, and they're there today. So no point in talking about it today.
De-escalation, I hope. De-escalation.
Let's see if something comes of it, because it doesn't seem to be making much progress. The U.S. doesn't seem to be making much progress solving the problem they created, which is the Strait of Hormuz issue.
You wouldn't see it like that, but yeah.
Well, anyway, solve one problem, create another. We call that unintended consequences. But you predicted it 6 months ago. But anyway, that's it for this episode of Michael LeBlanc, media entrepreneur and LA traveler. And you are?
And I'm Sylvain Charlebois, the food professor in Chilliwack, in honor of the band Chilliwack.
So safe travels, my friend, and everyone else.
Take care.